Look at how they've massacred my boy. They put ammunition on the cocks. Ugh. By the way, welcome back, everybody. You know what time it is. It's Patch Notes time with a nice, lovely mini-season here, the Jackpot, which, if you don't know, currently there is the overarching season called the Next Steps, and these little mini-seasons are kind of like a little appetite teaser throughout it as well. $10 again to the season, and it usually gives you a variety of like little parts and shenanigans. But let's go ahead and go over what you can get with the free side of things here. So, a little sticker here, okay, if you're big into that. A coupon for those who like to craft special materials, 50 engineer badges. You get another strategic reserve, which is just a small amount of resources. I've been finding that they're usually badges. Epic coupon for so that reduces the cost of crafting. Another 50 badges. Another military reserve, which is just slightly higher than strategic. Another 50 badges as well. A free blueprint to make the hail duck, which always seems kind of peculiar because I'm trying to think of who actually really even cares about the hail duck, but I guess here you go. Here is your option. You can't really sell it. But hey, all it cost you is a few $1,000s worth of duck parts right now. Beyond that, another 75 badges here, as well as another 100 badges at 26. And really the bigger thing for me is the outstash containers here, or the outcast stash. So you get these nice, lovely CKs here, with actually, most of them actually do have pretty nice visual changes to the weapons. Honestly, the big thing that I would get is mostly the CK Demon here, just because I love the spikes and the nice kind of brutalist Asian aesthetic here. But if you're also really into sparks as well, this looks absolutely stellar in my opinion. I got this one a while ago, so go ahead and get your hands on that. And if you're really into melee parts, honestly, really can't go wrong with this next Killer for the Dubza. Beyond that, the humanitarian aid container as well, which if y'all don't know what these are, they basically just contain a variety of resources. Usually the big thing you want to get is the Iranian war, because that can be a lot of money, but the vast majority of the time you're probably going to get engineers badges. Lots and lots of badges. Beyond that, some more engineers badges for the level 32, level 35, you get some more coins, more badges at 38, and then the big thing is the scouts and containers, so basically requires you to complete basically every single level in this season, which is not terribly hard to do. But with it, you do get the ability to get this nice little crate that sells for 400-ish coins here, 480-ish coins, at least on PC. It might be completely separate on the console side of things. But that is basically the cost of like a nice epic tier weapon here. So if you've been looking at getting an epic tier weapon, get that container, sell it, buy whatever you want, and you'll usually be pretty solid, pretty set. Beyond that, though, there's also the paid aspect of that. While the paid thing also comes with a lot more coins and a lot of other cosmetic things, the real thing you can actually get these paid seasons for is the epic tier and legendary parts that come with it. So with this one, you get 2 of these Slipneers as well as 1 of the Hewn cabins. The Slipneers right now are going for approximately 720 per, while the Hewn is going for around roughly 1350. And then beyond that, you also get the Pegasus engine here, which is a real big chonking boy, and it goes for $4,600. So that's a pretty substantial price increase. You can also just use it yourself, the Pegasus engine being the one that reduces the power penalty associated with your movement parts. So aka, you can have higher acceleration on a car with many wheels or many tracks. The Hewn cabin is really great for any sort of build that deals with overheating weapons a bunch, and the Slipneer is really great just for any weapon that rotates. So any of those slower cannon builds or caucus builds, this is really fantastic for, or also really good for just Leviathans too, because Leviathans have a lot of rotating weapons. Also really good for the things like the Whirlwind as well, since that has really slow turning speed. Beyond that, there's also the crafting side of things as well, which also be kind of important as well. So when it comes to these legendary things, these are all fused, so you really can't sell it. So this is translating your $4,600 Pegasus engine into a non-sellable but very powerful legendary weapon here. So I honestly would go for things like maybe the Fortune. The Apollo is not really terribly necessary to fuse, but if you're really trying to maximize your weight, this could be very good. This is really only meant for min-maxers. And the Helios is also a really good weapon choice as well, because the Helios, very good at damage output. Plus, the fusions are really excellent for just dealing a whole lot of damage. And also just make it generally more usable. But generally, you're going to need more than 1 Helios. You usually get like 2 or 3 per build. Also, the Heather as well, if you're really big into like volley rocket launching. But these are kind of a harder build to work with. But they're also kind of fun. On the epic side of things, these are really just kind of more up to your preference. All of these things are rather meddling. They're not terribly good. The blockchain's kind of nice, but honestly, I'm like, eh. I'd rather just take the Slipneers and use them as is, because Slipneers are really good track. But entirely up to you. You can also get the fused versions of the Hummingbird, which has durability and acceleration efficiency increase, whatever that may be. But it's also, you need 4 of these to really work out, and they're required to use these 2 slip mirrors. So it's like 800-ish bucks, plus all of these resources, which is kind of a lot of money. So really, this is only meant for people that really want to min-max. But that's kind of my review this season. It's a good little reward. I would say not as interesting or as enticing as someone like me, because the last season's reward were really cool. I really do like the autocannon, but we'll have to see. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Next thing, though, we got ourselves the lovely game modes, and these are the kind of rotational brawls that kind of go out here every 7-ish days. So there is the Legends of the Exhibition, the Wheels of Fortune, and the Ice and Fire 1, respectively. Then Operation Radiance makes its appearance yet again. I'm not sure why. But essentially, the Legends of the Exhibition is that you play with pre-made builds from the exhibition, so you really don't need any car yourself. Just go ahead, enjoy it, and just battle and see who can actually get the most points. And points just come through destruction as well, so really just deal a high amount of damage and make sure that you choose the correct, not really kind of trash exhibition builds. And really the big thing with this is that you get to do a variety of challenges every single day. But don't worry, even if you're only able to do 1 day of challenges, these all stack up, so you can go ahead and quickly go through it as time allows you. And most of the time, most of these challenges can be done relatively quickly. So the big thing when it comes to this Legend of Exhibition thing is you get this nice level-to-level duck at the very end of it, which for whatever reason, this duck is going for nearly 2,000 coins right now. So that is honestly kind of a awesome deal if that continues. Beyond that, the Humanitarian Aid Container is really nice, plus this free little decor item as well, as long as you don't get the sticker. Beyond that, the Fortune Brawl, you just kind of work out with small little fortune cars, shoot, flaming tires at each other, and blow up really quickly. Kind of a quick little mode here, but it's fun as well. So it's a team-based mode, get as many points up to 6,000, and you win. And you get scrap metal as war. Although, to be fair, yeah, that's funny. So the Legends of the Exhibition is batteries, then it's scrap. Not really much of a difference in terms of, like, your amount of price per time, but, something to consider if that's what you're really itching for. Beyond that, big thing to know about this one is that you get the Military Reserves container, the Constructors container, which is one that just gives you containers that items for your garage. So if you really want to decorate your garage more, I guess you can get that. And then also you get the Logistician's container, which just gives you access to a variety of crafting-esque storage quality of life features. So it's either coupons, or it's going to be a storage or blueprint expansion, or in the very bad case, you get a stabilizer, which just encourages you to defuse items, which is a huge waste of money. Please don't do fusions. Beyond that, we got the Ice and Fire, which is basically a PvP team deathmatch. Get 20 kills, whoever gets that first wins, with a slight little twist. One team is going to be cryogenic weapons, one team is going to be fire weapons. What will work? What will win? I mentioned flame would win more often, but that's just me. But there's also a quick little twist on this, where there actually is power-ups available on the map, so you can get either double damage, invulnerability, and ammo replenishment. But the thing is that you can't really stack double damage and invulnerability. You can either have one or the either, but ammunition can be picked up regardless. But again, nice thing to worry about this is they get the Paratroopers container as well, which just gives you a variety of cosmetic items here, which really the big one I kind of want is the Russian Roulette, which is the kind of hubcap thing that applies to all wheels. Looks kind of cool. Plus some other paints and minor cosmetic things that would be kind of cool to have on top of your car. But you actually get 2 of them, so on day 5 and day 1 has one. As well as Humanitarian Aid, Engineer Badges, a Winter Camo Paint, which I can't really find right now, but I imagine that probably looks just as what you'd expect. And then a Trophy CK Crate, which honestly, love that, love CKs. So I feel like honestly, the Ice and Fire one is going to be the one I'm going to really do the most, just because I really do like those CKs. Beyond that, Operation Radiance. Y'all know what Operation Radiance is, honestly. At this point, it has been done over 1,500 times, but essentially it's a map where you have to try to get all the way to the very end without getting touched or fall off. Otherwise, you become these horrible Ravager bots. And it's basically on-touch, instant death. So you really want to be able to destroy these things super quickly. Beyond that, though, they have a variety of nice little containers here. You get the memories, which just gives you small cosmetic items here, paints, and honestly, a lot of stickers. So most likely going to get stickers, but hey, you might get something. Another stickers container as well, Military Reserve, which is just resources, paints package, and then another Logistician's container. So again, very minor rewards when it comes to the Operation Radiance event. So honestly, kind of one that I would skip, but hey, up to y'all. So now going into the more kind of controversial changes they've implemented here. This mostly deals with the quote-unquote hit scan weapons of this game. And for those who don't know, this mostly is pertaining to things around the machine guns and shotguns. Other weapons are not nearly as affected, with energy weapons not really seeing too much changes, at least to their damage like calculations. So essentially, as it existed previously, if you shot with a machine gun on a target, you basically instantaneously did damage to them. There wasn't really much consideration for things like a bullet drop or travel time and things of that nature. To counteract that, though, machine guns had an artificially low range and huge spread that made it necessarily kind of very inaccurate for the most part. With this, they're basically changing it, so now these things have to take into consideration travel time. But with that comes a variety of perks as well. So now the minimum range has gone from 300 to 500 meters, which is stupendously huge for some of these weapons. So just to give you consideration as to what that actually is, this is the basic crossout range that most people are very familiar with. And starting from right here, 300 meters is all the way out there to that bus. They can see all the way into the distance. So this right here is 300 meters from that starting line all the way back there. These guns can then travel 200 meters beyond that. That is insane. But with that, though, that means now you have to consider things like drop and actual targeting your players in the distance. And that is going to be considerably hard, especially with faster paced builds. So while you can hit further distances, your accuracy and your chance of actually dealing damage at that distance is going to be way lower. But there's also kind of things to help with that too. So for the most part, most of these weapons have seen a reduction in their spread. So eventually, the reticles have gotten tighter and they're not going to be nearly as scattered all over the place. So shooting long distances is still going to be relatively accurate, which for machine guns seems kind of weird because, you know, machine guns are not necessarily quote-unquote accurate because they're just meant to be like blasting out as much as humanly possible, but still accurate for crossout standards. And beyond that, rate of spread increase just means that the more you fire, the less that your reticle expands out, and generally you're just staying more accurate, tighter for longer periods of time. As well as that, also, a lot of them have been seeing huge penetration increases as well, which given the huge impetus on penetration for a lot of weapons and the huge thick armor plating that a lot of cars have nowadays, having armor penetration on these cars is going to be, honestly, kind of sick. Now, they don't have 70%. Some of it is 60% or 80%, 80%, 70%, 65% for some of these other ones as well, with some of them even getting up to 100% with the parser here. So honestly, huge benefit for just dealing damage with a lot of these machine guns, which honestly is kind of necessary because tied with this was also the changes to their limited ammo reserves. So if you don't know, I guess if you didn't see, you can see now at the bottom here, there is 400 ammunition for these caucuses. Previously, it was unlimited. So now that it is kind of more reserved, you need to have a bit more ammunition when it comes to actually, or penetration when it comes to actually dealing with enemies, because there has been instances, especially when I'm dealing in PvE missions and I'm dealing with things like the Stephen Wolves or the Scavengers, there has been instances where I've put in hundreds of rounds into a car before it blows up because of its, you know, weird ways of turning around, and I'm just dealing damage all over the place. So having a little bit of penetration here massively helps out dealing with some of these thicker armor pieces. The only downside is, though, is that means for people, you really can't just spam and just shoot blanketly without having to worry about ammunition. You can do that nowadays. The only downside is that you will have to slap in things like ammo crates onto your car so that you can actually go ahead and continue to spam with impunity, which for the most part is relatively easy to do. You can just slap it underneath your car, and that's relatively easy to go ahead and hide. That also will mean that your power score will likely increase as well. So machine gun builds will probably see a slight elevation into their power score, as well as also just having explosives all over their car, which makes them more vulnerable to things like flame weapons or melees or cannon shots. But for the most part, I've tested this out, and honestly, the machine gun ammunition thing really hasn't been that big of an issue. In PvE missions, I basically always have unlimited ammunition because there's always drops around. Although I've noticed that drops are being kind of inconsistent. I've noticed that in some instances, there was no ammunition at all for like a good solid 5 minutes. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of running ammunition here. I need something here to replenish my stocks. And then eventually came back. There was like on some weird lunatic steel cradle mission for plastic. I'm not sure why that was not giving me a whole lot of ammunition. And in PvP, most PvP missions don't last terribly long enough to warrant having ammunition crates on it. But for higher power scores, where you're dealing with thicker cars that have a lot more ammunition, and maybe you're shooting at a distance, then you really are going to start wanting to slap on an ammo crate or two. You realistically are not going to need more than 1 or 2 to get the vast majority of the ammunition you need, because each one is 40% ammunition, so 2 of them is 80% extra ammunition, and these are relatively easy to go ahead and put on your car, and it's only going to be like 200-ish power score, really. So while people are saying like, oh my god, it's destroying my cars, for the most part, it's not really going to change a whole lot in terms of how you play, and especially at lower power score, you're barely even going to notice this, unless you're an absolute just like fiend in unloading all of your ammunition all the times here. Beyond that, we also have some changes here to the cannons. So for the most part here, their reload time has seen a decrease across the board for the Little Boy, Hulk, and Fat Man, as well as the Avenger, Judge, Prosecutor, and the Executioner 88. There's also been pretty substantial damage increases. So the Little Boy got a big increase, same with the Hulk, Fat Man, and as well as the Avenger with a 71% increase. Dang. Now, to be fair, these are very low power score cannons, but still, seeing a huge damage increase like that means you might see these come a lot more popular at lower power scores. And then the Judge has a 50%, Prosecutor's only 12%, and the Executioner only has an 9% increase, which, to be fair, is rather nice because that thing already has a huge amount of penetration, probably doesn't need that much extra damage. And then beyond that, I believe quite a few of them have also seen a reduction in their spread. This is mostly for the turreted cannons here, so for those that actually turn left or right and swivel on an axis, they have way less spread now and makes them way easier to go ahead and fire at a distance. Which honestly, for the most of us, that's just going to mean that these cannon bots out here, the ones that you see out in the PvP missions, those cannon bots are going to be very, very, very accurate now, and they might be scarily good. So it'll be interesting to see what that's like facing now, like an Emily bot with like triple Avengers or something goofy like that. Beyond that here, we also have the ammo pack actually seeing an increase in the amount of ammunition it provides here. Instead of being 30%, it is now 40%, which honestly probably helps out a lot with dealing with the brand new ammunition changes. And I feel like, you know, putting it at least on the blue tier here makes it a lot more accessible, because if you put it on like an epic tier increase, then that can make it a bit more inaccessible for newer players. So you get a minor nerf here to the Tempest that was seen as being a little bit too effective at all power scores here. Which, if you don't know, the Tempest is this nice, lovely special tier rapid firing autocannon, and honestly, autocannons have been absolutely demolishing this past. So I guess I can see why this thing would be nerfed a little bit, because this thing is very nice. Now the Hot Rod Cabin has seen an additional perk added to it, which increases its stability, its spread stability by 25%. So effectively meaning the more you fire, the tighter your shots are, and you're going to be more accurate at distances. But this only applies to this one cabin that is also still relatively inaccessible because it's kind of expensive. It's a park cabin, so a nice little thing, but I can't imagine it's going to be terribly impactful. Mostly you're going to see it at like medium power scores, if even have it. Beyond that, the Raijin has come to its end. I know y'all have been absolutely fiending against the Raijin. At least the Reddit, they absolutely hate this thing. So energy increased by 1 point here. It's reduced its ammo reserve, so you're going to need to have more ammo packs on this, as well as the power score increasing by what looks like another 100-ish points, as well as the reload increasing by another second and a third. So nearly, I would say, that's a pretty significant increase to its reload speed. It's over half an increase. And then the meteor now accuracy is now achieved when fully charged, which means realistically you cannot just kind of partially charge it and still get the huge accuracy bonus. Now you have to really commit in order to actually be able to fire this at a good long distance, which honestly probably just fits in line with the fact that everything else now needs a bit more accuracy. And then the perk bonuses are reduced from 12% to a 10%. So if y'all don't know, this is the big old hunkin' cannon here they used to get from I believe it's a Syndicate pack ages ago. But essentially, a direct hit from the enemy increases the weapon damage by 10% for 10 seconds. It stacks up to 3 times, but fully disappears after a miss. But now this can only occur instead of being 12%, 10%, so your damage is not going to be nearly as high. So you're going to see this thing become a little bit less popular, but still, otherwise, I think this thing is still going to be quite good. And the reloading time, you honestly probably could offset this with a reload enhancer, and I feel like you should be able to see relative effectiveness stay approximately the same. Although now you're going to have to actually slap on a engine or a generator to go ahead and get the maximum reload benefit, since I believe the tier 1 reloader only needs 1 energy, but if you want to get the flywheel, that needs 2 now. So it just makes the builds slightly less effective, and you have to be at a slightly higher power score to really get this effect. So you're probably not going to see this nearly as common in very low power scores, at least in its current iteration. And if you do see it, it's going to be less powerful than usual. Because if you say you only had a 24 power cabin, now you're really going to be able to put on that small flywheel, the small little reload enhancement on the discharger, and that's going to effectively increase its reload across the board, on top of the fact that the reload has just increased in general too. And the Veron here has seen a significant buff in the sense that now its power score consumption has been reduced by 1. And considering that for the most part, this means that most builds can now use 2 Verons. That means a 2 energy savings here, which can add in a lot of things, either from a radar, more cooling / overheating capacity, maybe a different engine. It could be a variety of different things. Plus, it's paired with an over 100-point reduction in power score, which probably should compensate for the fact that you're probably going to be adding more stuff to it. So you're going to see it be relatively in the same power score, now just with more enhancements and generally more diversity as well. And for those who don't know, this is the nice level-to-level crossbow here, which, for after a short time, a shot from the Veron deals 10% more damage, while also having its projectile speed increased by 15%. The rate of fire is maintained, the bonus stacks up to 3 times. So this is essentially just supposed to be one of those crossbows that heavily prioritizes stacking constant charges and stacking consistent hits, and being relatively good. I'm not sure how popular the Veron crossbow is. I haven't really seen it in PvP matches in a hot second, but hey, something helps. Beyond that, we have a pretty significant increase in the Astrius, so damage is increased blanket 11%, plus the penetration is increased by another 15%, which when dealing with beefy cards is quite nice. So this is kind of like essentially like the poor man's version of the Scorpion here, where you can charge it up, dealing more damage, and if you overcharge it, it deals even way more damage at the cost of then actually damaging the thing it's attached to. So attaching this thing to your cabin is kind of idealized in that regard, but it's kind of a nice little fast shooting sniping projectile here. And I guess the fact that it wasn't doing a whole lot, according to them, it must have been doing real bad. So the Phoenix here has gotten kind of an interesting amalgamations of buffs / nerfs. It gets a bullet damage, which means now it should be able to like pierce through small light armor skirts and not just get stuck at the very outside, as well as also just having an extra penetration ability as well. So if it hits an accessory, it'll just go straight through it. Beyond that, it has a blast radius reduction of 29%. So nearly a third of its blast radius is just gone, which is kind of huge when you're dealing with kind of big chunky cars. But the weird thing is they added a stability perk for it. So basically every 10% hit gives you 10% stability, stacking up to 3 times. So you get 30% extra stability. But the thing is, the crossbow already itself has pretty alright characteristics when it comes to flying. Honestly, I would be much more in favor of it getting like a speed enhancement to its projectile, but hey, go off, queen. Now we got the young Wang. So for this one, they slightly increased the height of the collision model here, which just means it's slightly taller, making it a little bit difficult to put on a car. As well as the projectile amount now applies to weapons positioned sideways as well. So if y'all don't know, this thing, when applied upside down, instead of shooting 5 projectiles when fully charged, only shoots 2. So this also applies if it's applied sideways as well. And on top of that, if you're also trying to completely encase this weapon in something and trying to prevent it from getting attacked on all sides, now that actually checks to make sure that if you're going to shoot it through a little opening inside the cabin, it must be able to actually fully accommodate the projectile. So even if you have like a little pinhole in there, that will no longer work. You have to have a sufficiently large enough amount of space to actually go ahead and shoot the Young Wang projectiles. But this is mostly geared towards versions of the Young Wang where it was being mounted upside down or sideways. Equalizer, small little change, extra large collision model here, which, So now this basically just makes it so that you really can't just kind of obscure by either mounting it underside or in a bunch of armor. Which kind of sucks because Equalizer is still a very brittle weapon, but alright, cool, why not? The Terrero gets a very similar change to the Hot Rod, where it just increases the spread stability as well, just to make sure it can be fired at a very long distance, so Terrero cabin users rejoice! Beyond that, now the Step Spider here, its perk now applies to things like rocket launchers, and also increases the maneuverability of homing rockets. So for those who don't know, this perk here is that increases the accuracy and projectile speed for rocket launchers of all types. Homing rockets also get a bonus in the maneuverability. Does not work with the Heather, Clarinet Tau, or the ATGM Flute. So those still get a little bit no love, but essentially just makes it so rocket builds can be a bit more diverse and accurate. Still doesn't quite work with its pack theme, but hey, it's still kind of a cool looking cabin with a very nice low profile, which honestly, I feel like is what it's 80% used for. I feel like its actual rocket launcher perk things are kind of irrelevant. So the Dusk here has kind of like a weird little mishmash of perks as well. So it affects the rocket launchers except for the Heather, Tau, and the Flute. but it's kind of a weird little secondary perk. So it gives extra damage by 25%, so nearly a fourth extra damage here. But it increases the spread of the rockets as well as reducing their speed, so they become slower and a bit more spread out. And the homing rockets themselves also have reduced maneuverability as well. So with this one, it just opens it up to a way more rocket range, but also makes it so that you're realistically going to have way less accuracy and way less pinpointing, kind of almost incentivizing you to get closer to use this. But the thing is, the Dusk perk itself, the Dusk cabin itself, is still a very light, high-speed cabin. So I guess you could kind of do drive-bys with that now. So if you want to do like a double cricket on this thing and just absolutely lay havoc down, this could be kind of nice. But I feel like at this point, this kind of inhabits a very similar niche to that one cabin that increases explosions. The Harpy, that's what I was thinking of here, because this one increases explosion radius, as also just gives you extra ammunition, which is also just kind of like a nice to have, especially nowadays with machine guns needing ammunition. Sorry for all these light wheel users here. Your Buggy wheel, instead of you getting a 40% reduction on the speed requirement for, you know, anything that has a speed requirement, is now only 30%. So this is just because the Buggy wheel was just extremely effective at a lot of power scores, especially with light builds. And it was also just kind of abused on slower cars as well, because these Buggy wheels had very low power requirements and very low profiles, so it made them relatively easy to slip into an existing build. And then all of a sudden you just had reduced speed requirements, which, you know, generally you had to use things like the Bigfoot wheels, which have higher power score and higher just power consumption as well. So I think you used to consume like 8% power up to 16% power. But if you could get the same thing with Buggy wheels, that only consumes like 10% power or 5% power respectively, oh my goodness, you just got yourself a huge bonus there. So the Oppressor engine here has a little bit of a fancy thing where now it increases the speed of projectiles, 50% bonus at 80 kilometers or above, but also reduces its speed by 2%. So essentially meaning any sort of machine gun users now really have a strong incentive to use something like the Oppressor engine, as opposed to some of the other engines that have, you know, pretty substantial perks. But this one's like, oh wow, this can actually really substantially help my DPS at very long distances. So for helicopter users especially, this is going to be really good. Beyond that, small little power score increase for the meat grinder, just because it's slightly too effective at low power scores. Whatever. So the Swarmers here has actually had a pretty substantial increase in its effectiveness. Blast damage now does not decrease with distance from the center of the explosion, meaning that any part around the explosion can get full DPS, which is substantial for actually being able to do a lot of damage to the side of a car. And additionally, too, it also increases the enemy detection radius by up to 150 meters, which is actually pretty substantial. You don't really have to have like a big radar for this, but that's nice. You'll probably still have to have a big fancy radar on your car just to make the swarm still useful, but having any sort of built-in radar is kind of nice. So I wonder if they're going to start doing that for things like the Caucasus, but I highly doubt that. Beyond that, the Slaughterer here has the explosive projectile damage increased by 10%, pierce projectile damage increased by 20%, which is substantial, and the perk now increases damage by 3% for every 2 parts hit instead of 4%. Maximum bonus is reduced from 32% down to 21%, and the durability is increased by another 100-ish points. So this is a bit interesting. It basically reduces the variance of the damage of this weapon considerably by just increasing its base damage overall. But that means it's also not going to have nearly as dramatic of a swing throughout the time. So this makes it a bit more consistent, which for Slaughter users, congratulations, enjoy. Beyond that, durability for Lucifer has gone up an extra 40-ish points here, and now gives 3 projectiles for every 4 destroyed parts instead of 6 projectiles for the 8 parts before. So basically, instead of having to rely on big meaty hits, now you can just kind of rely on more standard hits and be able to consistently keep your ammunition. So especially for lower power score builds, this is going to be quite nice. We have the Destructor here. Base damage is increased by 20%, which is pretty substantial. And the perk damage bonus reduced from 800% though down to 400, which is a huge kick in the teeth, honestly. But then the heat bonus from the perk is also reduced by another 5% as well. Woo, dang, son. So this thing is not going to be able to really melt cabins anymore, but should still be able to deal a decent amount of damage to all the other cars' parts, hopefully. I mean, on bots, things used to just absolutely melt things, so kind of nice. Beyond that, Tsunami gets a bit beefier here with an extra 10% durability increase up to 903. I always just find it weird that the durabilities are just increased by, I'm guessing it's just blanket like 10% increases or whatnot, because the points are always so weirdly specific. Beyond that, the Mars cabin has seen a little bit of a nerf here. Mass limit is reduced by what appears to be 1,000 kilograms. The bonus to own damage is reduced from 30% down to 20%, and allied damage increased from 15 to 20%. So makes it slightly more of an ally-focused car build, but still substantial amount of damage increase. And the perk recharge time is increased by another 5 seconds here. So again, probably just makes sense because I feel like the Mars cabin has honestly been one of the more dominant heavy tier cabins for a hot second here, especially with the fact that you're able to increase ally damage so significantly. And imagine with any sort of significantly coordinated clan that can have, 3 or 4 people rocking this thing, this is really nice. Beyond that, the active perk radius for the Griffin has increased by 15 meters, which is good because honestly the Griffin kind of sucks. The Finned Whale, the speed bonus is reduced from 23 to 21%. So very minor nerf. Jackie here, this is honestly, I wonder if this has been nerfed a lot. So damage is reduced from 20% down to 15, so 5% damage reduction. Speed has been lowered from 7 to 4%, and the power requirement for cabins has been reduced from 20% down to 15. So it's still very useful, just not nearly as useful as this thing used to be, because Jackie was basically required to have on most cars because just how fantastic it was for just increasing your DPS. Beyond that, small little Typhoon build where it increases the upward aiming angles. It'd be kind of nice to actually figure out like how many degrees that actually is, but a boost to the Typhoon is always appreciated because that thing has been kicked in the teeth for a very long time. So the co-driver Grizzly has finally met its match. It has been nerfed, which I always find kind of funny, but considering how ubiquitous it is, it kind of makes sense. So essentially now you have to get hit 3 times instead of 2 times, which, okay. And at least 3 seconds time must elapse instead of the 1 second previously. And the talents start to decrease after 5 seconds instead of 10 seconds before. And a passive skill that reduces power to moving parts has been replaced by a 5% increase in its durability. Interesting. So the Grizzly co-driver was basically mandatory for any sort of super heavy builds. So this actually will make them way less durable than previous. And honestly, I used to use the Grizzly on basically every single build because the damage reduction was just so good and was so easy to activate all the time, especially in PvE missions. But okay, let's just see how much of a change this is. It'll make the other co-drivers more usable. And honestly, I feel like at higher power scores, the co-driver Grizzly wasn't used terribly often because I feel like the focus was always on damage at that point. So for Yuki, the distance activation is from 35 meters to 50 meters. The passive skill that increases the durability of movement parts has been replaced by a 50% reduction in the penalty movement parts power. So essentially, you're going to have better acceleration on this thing. So, okay, that's not too shabby. The extra 15 meters can actually be a huge difference because that extra 15 meters is actually a considerable amount of distance when you're dealing with like small minutia and smaller cars. Billy, the machine gun person. Now the talent reduces spread by 20% and no longer increases the damage received by the weapon. Oh, and that's a huge benefit right there. The damage received was the biggest reason why I never used Billy. Especially considering that you usually use this on machine gun builds, and machine guns are already extremely brittle. Oh wow, and they increased the time to overheat by 10%. Holy shenanigans. Because self-destruct damage is useless, but 10% increase to overheat? Oh my god, that's really good. And the Directional Fury passive skill now reduces spread increase by 20% instead of 10% previously. Oh my god, this is going to really dramatically increase the damage for Billy. Especially with the huge nerf in the damage absorption of Grizzly, this could be really good for just increasing damage overall. Especially with the limited amount of ammunition you have nowadays, you gotta increase damage where you can. Next we have the co-driver Phobos. The passive skill that increases the speed of the armored vehicle now also affects the maximum speed of movement parts. Okay, that's kind of nice because honestly, maximum speed doesn't really mean anything when you're driving, 70 miles and it's capped by your tracks anyway. That's nice. That's quality of life. And the Atlassian, the active steel now increases damage by 15% instead of 10% previously. Okay, it's substantial. And the passive skill that increases the radius of fire puddles has been replaced by a 25% increase in the speed of heating up parts with thermal damage, which, okay. I wonder if that's going to increase just the damage overall then of the puddle itself. I assume no. Honestly, I'd rather prefer having a big radius because honestly, it's more kind of for like the area denial thing. But I guess it kind of makes it a bit more quick to heat up. Which honestly, I wonder if that's going to feel worse because people that just drive through it now are going to be like, wow, I'm instantaneously heated up to 100%. We'll have to see. The Combat Exposure passive now works with all ammo types, and bonus value has been increased from 15 to 25%. Ooh, interesting. I wonder if that's actually going to be really good then for a lot of machine gun builds that now need extra ammunition regardless of the context. Okay, I think it's also kind of miscellaneous other things as well. So let me know what y'all think about this nice lovely update. Honestly, I appreciate a lot of what they've implemented in here. The ammunition changes are slightly weird, but honestly, I find it to be mostly fair because considering that previously ammunition users for cannons and for phoenixes and other things had to deal with ammo boxes, and the fact that anyone else didn't really have to deal with that is kind of BS, because that's honestly one of the bigger reasons why I never really switched to cannons or used cannons a whole lot, is because just dealing with the ammunition boxes made me extremely susceptible to things just like other cannon shots. So this kind of nice. This is kind of nice. But let me know what y'all think down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Feel free to follow the platform is your favorite. We're on that YouTube and the Twitch. Beyond that, also think about becoming a member. It only costs $1 on this platform, and that's it's just a nice little thing to feed my ego. Beyond that, Discord and Blue Sky down below if you want to get a 5, whatever, go live. So just join the community. On that, guys, see you guys next time. Bye-bye.